Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. They didn't notice me standing there at first. She was adjusting his collar, laughing too loud, her hands still resting on his chest long after the joke had ended. Champagne in one hand, his attention in the other. It was her office party. The same one she said I probably wouldn't enjoy. Just corporate types and boring speeches. She said, "You'll hate it." I showed up anyway. No warning. No text. Just walked in. And that's when I saw it, the real version of her. Not the one who sat at our kitchen table asking if we had eggs left. Not the one who pretended to fall asleep during the movie I picked. Not the woman who sighed when I forgot to pick up the dry cleaning. This version, she was alive, animated, almost glowing. And then he turned. He didn't flinch, didn't panic. He just looked at me, looked through me. There was no guilt in his eyes, not even surprise, just a kind of smug calm, like I had arrived exactly as he expected. She noticed me next, and in that flicker of a second, I watched something flash across her face. It wasn't shame. It was irritation, like I'd interrupted something important. And suddenly, the buzzing of the room, the clinking glasses, the laughter, the low hum of music, all of it felt miles away. I wasn't angry, not yet. I wasn't even shocked. I was still, frozen in a moment I hadn't been prepared for, even though I should have been. He whispered something in her ear. She smiled. Then they both walked toward me like they were about to offer me a napkin for a mess I didn't even know I'd made. And right then, before either of them spoke, I realized something horrible. I wasn't the one being cheated on. I was the one being replaced. They didn't say a word at first. Just exchanged that silent glance people use when they're deciding how much truth they can get away with. Then she stepped forward and gave me the kind of hug that says, "We'll talk about this later. Okay?" The kind you give to someone you're trying to disarm, not love. "This is Bennett," she said, gesturing toward him like he was a new plant she bought. "He's on my project team. I told you about him, remember?" No, she hadn't. Not once. Not even a single mention. He extended his hand with a forced smile. "Pleasure," he said. His voice was like velvet over broken glass. I shook his hand, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to feel it. Something real. Something to prove this wasn't a dream. The rest of the party blurred. She introduced me to people like I was an afterthought. I stood beside her as she chatted with coworkers, pretending I belonged, while her eyes kept drifting toward Bennett. Every time he spoke, she tilted her head like he was saying something brilliant. Every time she laughed, I felt like I was shrinking. The worst part? Nobody seemed surprised by how close they were. In fact, some of the people looked at me like I was the one out of place. That's when I realized, this wasn't new. I was late to a story everyone else already knew the ending to. When the crowd started to thin and the music got softer, I pretended to go to the restroom. Instead, I watched them from behind a column near the bar. She leaned in close to him, said something that made him smirk. He placed a hand on the small of her back, slowly, casually, like he'd done it before, like it was normal. Then they left, together, and I did something I told myself I'd never do. I followed. Not out of jealousy, that came later. Not out of rage, that came much later. I followed out of something much worse. The desperate hope that I was wrong. That maybe I misunderstood. That maybe this wasn't what it looked like. But deep down, I knew. I followed them out of the building, across the parking lot, and watched her unlock his car like it was second nature. She laughed again as she got in. He leaned across and adjusted her seat. She let him. I stood in the shadows, a grown man hiding behind a bush like some rejected ghost, watching the woman I loved leave with someone who didn't even have to fight for her. The night didn't end when they drove away. I sat in my car for over an hour, staring through the windshield, replaying everything like a scratch tape. Every laugh, every glance, every brush of her hand against his. They weren't accidents. They were habits. Habits don't form overnight. She'd practiced this, rehearsed it, perfected it. I didn't sleep, didn't eat. The next morning, Lorraine acted like nothing had happened. She made coffee, complained about a hangover, kissed my cheek on autopilot. I flinched. I told myself to let it go, that confronting her without proof would only make me look paranoid. But that look he gave me, that quiet arrogance, it haunted me. So when she left her phone charging in the kitchen and stepped into the shower, I made a choice I'd been avoiding for years. I opened it. I knew her password. Of course I did. She never bothered to change it, maybe because she thought I'd never look. And for 11 years she was right. But the moment her lock screen lit up, I should have stopped. Because there it was, a text preview from B. It read, "Last night was dangerous. I can still smell you." My chest caved in. I didn't open the thread right away. I just stood there, the phone shaking in my hand. Somewhere above me, the shower kept running like nothing was broken. When I finally opened the messages, my stomach twisted. There were dozens, no hundreds of texts, code words, schedules, inside jokes I didn't understand, photos from hotel rooms, voice notes where she giggled like a teenager, things I had never seen her do. Not for years, not for me. But it wasn't just the flirting. It was the way she spoke to him, like he was the person who really knew her, like I was just a character in a story she'd already stopped reading. She'd been with him during our anniversary weekend. While I made her a surprise dinner at home, she was at a conference with Bennett. I even saw a photo. She was in the same green dress from the party, except this time, it was on the floor behind her in the hotel room mirror. I dropped the phone. Not from shock. From rage. Not the kind you act on, the kind that makes your hands go cold. Upstairs, the shower turned off. I picked up her phone, locked it, and placed it exactly where I found it. Like a coward. Or maybe like a man planning something bigger. Because I wasn't going to scream. I was going to wait. That evening, I suggested we go out to eat. Just the two of us. Lorraine seemed surprised, but she agreed without hesitation. "You're acting sweet today," she said, touching my arm. I smiled, but it felt foreign on my face. We went to this cozy Italian place she used to love years ago. Back when we still talked about dreams instead of grocery lists. I had reserved a quiet table near the back, away from the clatter of dishes and the buzz of other couples. The waiter brought breadsticks and 2 glasses of wine. She laughed at something on her phone, probably Bennett, and I pretended not to notice. I didn't know what I was planning. I wasn't trying to catch her in the act. I just wanted to see who she became when she thought everything was fine. She ordered pasta. I didn't touch my food. I just watched her, really watched her. The way she tilted her head, the way she held her fork. It was all familiar. And yet I felt like I was across from a woman I didn't recognize anymore. Somewhere between her second glass of wine and dessert, she leaned in and said, "Thank you for this. You feel different lately, more present." I nearly choked. Present? While she was slipping out of hotel rooms and letting another man kiss her neck, I was the one who wasn't present. I didn't say anything, just reached into my coat pocket and slowly slid an envelope across the table. She blinked. "What's this?" "Open it," I said, keeping my voice steady. She hesitated, then peeled it open. Inside was a single printed photo. The mirror selfie. Her dress crumpled on the floor. Bennett's hand, unmistakably his, around her waist. I watched her face drain of color like someone had pulled the plug on her confidence. She didn't speak, didn't blink, just stared at it. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "I followed you. From the party. I know everything." Still silence. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Her hands trembled as she folded the photo back into the envelope, as if hiding it would erase what it proved. Finally, she looked at me and whispered, "I didn't mean for you to find out like this." I laughed. It was short, dry, and full of something I hadn't felt in years, clarity. "I didn't mean to find out at all," I replied. "That was your plan, wasn't it?" The waiter returned with the check. Lorraine couldn't even look up. Paid. I stood. I left her there at the table. Not because I wanted to be dramatic, but because I knew anything I said now would only make it worse. And somehow I wasn't done yet. When I got home that night, the house felt colder. Not in temperature, in presence. It was as if everything inside had already decided I didn't belong. I stood in the hallway for a moment, coat still on, listening to the silence. No apologies. No footsteps rushing after me. Just the quiet hum of appliances and a soft ticking from the kitchen clock we bought during our honeymoon. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even broken. I felt emptied, like someone had scooped out everything I used to believe and left behind a shell that only resembled me. She came home 40 minutes later. I heard her heels on the driveway, the front door clicking softly shut. I didn't go out to meet her. I sat in the living room, staring at the dark TV screen like it might give me an answer. She didn't say anything at first, just walked past me and headed upstairs. I let her. I didn't want another lie. I wanted space. I wanted to see what she would do when the pretending stopped working. But curiosity is a vicious thing. It doesn't go away just because you're exhausted. After a while, I went upstairs. Her purse was on the dresser, half-zipped. Her shoes sat neatly by the bed, the same way she always left them when she wanted to seem composed. I walked past her and into the guest room, a place I rarely entered. That room had slowly turned into her makeshift home office during the pandemic. Then it became storage. Then it became off-limits without ever being declared so. I opened the closet. Inside were boxes I didn't recognize. Not sealed, just tucked away behind old coats and a broken lamp. I pulled one out. It was filled with cards. Dozens of greeting cards. Valentine's Day. Anniversaries. Even one that said, "Just because." All signed by him, Bennett. She kept them. Every single one. Tucked beneath those cards was a small photo album. Cheap, plastic, no labels. Inside were pictures of them, selfies, candids, places I had never been with her. One was taken at a lake house. She once told me she hated lakes. I sat on the floor, flipping through them like pages in a book I was never supposed to read. Every photo felt like a knife. Not because of what they showed, but because of what they proved. This wasn't an affair. It was a second life. One she'd built in the dark, while I sat in the light wondering why I couldn't feel warmth anymore. Behind the last photo, there was a folded piece of paper. A list, written in her handwriting, titled things to tell him eventually. I didn't read it. Couldn't. I put everything back in the box, closed the closet door, and walked out of that room for good. I didn't sleep that night. I just laid in bed next to her, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing, wondering how she could sleep at all. Every breath she took was a reminder of the life she lived so easily while mine was unraveling in real time. I stared at the ceiling, blinking into the darkness, thinking of all the ways people say goodbye without ever saying the words. By sunrise, I was already dressed. She was still asleep when I grabbed the duffel bag from the top of the closet, the one we used for weekend trips when we still did things like that. I packed lightly, a few clothes, my laptop, my documents. I didn't need much. I didn't even know where I was going. All I knew was that staying would make me bitter, and bitterness was the last thing I wanted to rot into. I didn't leave a dramatic letter. No emotional voicemail. I wanted her confusion. I wanted silence to be the mirror she finally had to face. So instead, I left a single sheet of paper on the kitchen table. It had 3 words. You were seen. That was it. No threats. No begging. No anger. I stepped outside into the morning fog. The air was sharp, cleansing. I got in the car, backed out of the driveway, and didn't look at the house once. Not even in the rearview mirror. The sun was just beginning to rise behind the trees, as if the world didn't even notice what had fallen apart inside that house. I drove for hours. No music. No calls. Just the road stretching endlessly in front of me and the strange freedom that comes when there's nothing left to lose. By the time I checked into a small roadside motel, my hands were numb. Not from the cold, but from holding back everything I hadn't let myself feel. I sat on the edge of the stiff bed, staring at the outdated wallpaper, and finally let out a sound. A half-laugh, half-sob that felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about erasure. She hadn't just lied. She had rewritten our story, quietly editing me out of it while I was still in the room. And for once, I was done trying to matter to someone who'd already chosen a different ending. Took her 3 days to call. Not because she didn't care, but because she didn't think I would actually go through with it. I think she assumed I'd storm off, sleep on my buddy's couch, and come crawling back once I'd cooled down. That was her pattern. Pretend things weren't happening until they exploded, then hand me a broom and tell me to be reasonable. But this time, I didn't play my role. The call came just before noon. I let it ring out. She tried again 20 minutes later. And then came the texts, at first soft, cautious, then increasingly desperate. Where are you? Can we just talk? I didn't want it to be like this. She never once said, I'm sorry. That's how I knew she hadn't changed. She was still trying to manage the story instead of owning it. And I wasn't interested in helping her anymore. By the 4th day, she showed up at the motel. I watched from behind the curtains as she got out of her car, looking around like she was stepping into unfamiliar territory. Her hair was messy, her makeup minimal, but her expression was unmistakable. She was nervous. Not because she missed me, because she didn't know who I was without her control. She knocked once, then again. Then she said my name. I opened the door halfway, stood in the gap, and waited. She looked at me like she expected a hug, like that would undo the distance between us. Eli, she said quietly, please, can we talk? I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just stepped aside and let her walk in. Not because I forgave her, but because I wanted to hear how she would lie to me now that she knew the lies no longer worked. She sat on the edge of the bed, fidgeting. I don't know how it got this far, she started. I didn't mean to hurt you. I sat across from her, arms crossed. But you did. I made a mistake, she whispered. No, I said. You made a decision. Over and over. She looked down, silent. That was the first honest moment I'd seen from her in years. And that's when I realized something that startled me. I wasn't angry anymore. Not because I healed. Because I stopped expecting anything from her at all. She wasn't losing me now. She had already lost me a long time ago. I didn't throw her out that night. There was no shouting, no smashed glass, no theatrical storming off. That's what she expected, maybe even hoped for. Something dramatic to validate her guilt. But I gave her something worse. Peace. Because real endings aren't explosions. They're echoes. And I had already walked away inside myself weeks ago. The next morning, she offered to make coffee like it was any other day. I let her. I watched her move around the motel kitchenette. Too careful, too quiet. Every motion said, please don't leave for real. I didn't say much, just packed my bag again while she talked about fixing things. I could quit the project, she said suddenly. Cut contact. We could go to counseling. Lorraine, I said gently. You already packed your exit bag a long time ago. I just wasn't meant to read the label. She started to cry, and for the first time it didn't affect me. I didn't feel cold. I felt done. I didn't leave out of hatred. I left out of love, for myself. By noon I was gone. Not to disappear, but to rebuild. I drove to the coast, found a small place near the water. The kind with peeling paint, slow mornings, and friendly strangers who don't ask questions. I got a job at a bookstore, started sketching again. I slept better, ate slower. I even started smiling at my own jokes again. She emailed once. A long message full of nostalgia and what-ifs. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Sometimes the best closure isn't a response. It's silence. And now I'm living a life she'll never be part of. Not because I hate her, but because I finally realized I don't need someone who sees me as optional. I'm not healed completely, but I'm not broken anymore either. And that, to me, is a win. What moment in this story hit you the hardest? Was it the office party, the photo in the envelope, or the silence that followed? Tell us in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget, this is Reddit Confessions, where every ending is just the beginning of something real.